Hi, my name is Andrea Klim, and you are watching Turn to the Stars. And I want to say thank you for tuning in this week. The show this week is going to be wrapped around the planetary influences for June of 2014. I'm going to be talking about Mercury's retrograde, which goes from June 7th through July 1st. And I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Sagittarius, which is at its peak of lighted energy and influence on June 12th. To start out, I do want to show you a chart for today, which is June 3rd. And that chart is, before we put it up on the screen, what I'm going to be showing you on that chart is a influence that is occurring currently, which is growing in its influence between Saturn and Chiron, and the aspect that's forming is what we call a trine. And what that inspires is emotional connections, and those connections are being stimulated within us as I speak. Emotion that stimulates us to act, and this is what we call a water trine, which holds the potential for us to open and realize solutions. And that's a very good thing. Solutions to problems, and as human beings we are stimulated to act because of emotion, being that the moon is the closest body of energy that is to us here on Earth. What is actually occurring, though, is a sort of combining of ideas from different disciplines, which is Saturn, and traditions. It's a sharing of stories that we're experiencing together from each other together. This energy holds a willingness to be like an angel of mercy, and it does inspire that understanding for someone else's suffering. It's a sharing of ideas and stories of how other people have overcome and how they've managed times of change in their lives. So I'm going to put that chart up on the screen right now, and you can see what I've highlighted in this chart. And this is, as I said before, a chart for today, June 3rd, 2014. And over to the right, you can see a symbol that looks like a key. That's Chiron, the wounded healer, or the key that brings healing to us or good things to us. And it's typically through the things that we experience in our life that we realize how we can make a difference in the future. And you see a blue line that reaches from that key, which is at 17 degrees of Pisces over on the right side of the chart, probably about 3 o'clock. And if you take and you see a blue line, which is an aspect of energy or an angle, in astrology we call that an arc, right down to Saturn in Scorpio at the bottom of the chart, right about just past 6 o'clock. And Saturn looks like a cross with a little tail underneath it, and it's currently in the constellation of Scorpio, and it's retrograde. So there's a lot of inner healing or inner experiences and sharing of those ways that people have emotionally overcome things which have been difficult in their life. And it's interesting because this past weekend I went down to Brewster, Massachusetts on the Cape, and attended an astrology lecture on Friday night and workshop on Saturday all day. And that workshop was given by A.T. Mann, who his name is Tad Mann, and he's from New York, and he is a very well-known astrologer, written about 18 different books, and it was really a great weekend. He taught some techniques to other astrologers, me and my daughter being in attendance, and those techniques were in identifying from conception the ways or actually the experiences of the mother and how that helped to mold and create the child that she is carrying, which is the person who, through astrology, when we're looking at a birth chart, we're looking at the blueprint of that soul. So it was a really great workshop, and actually he gave out, he taught through the birth chart how you can actually identify the exact times in past that you had incarnated, exact years, months, and that is all through the looking at the birth chart, exact times in your life where experiences were promised based on where the planets were. Really incredible information, a whole new way of looking at a birth chart. So that's pretty exciting to be that he shared those stories of his lifetime work. So that actually does coincide with this Saturn Chiron trine that's actually occurring and growing in its manifestation of influence right now. So as you saw in that chart, Saturn was forming, like I said, a trine to Chiron, which opens up doors for restructuring, for a sort of thought process that we can tweak in order to produce new things which are different yet still work and make sense. So sharing of different experiences is very powerful at this time. And with Chiron in Pisces, while aspected to Saturn in Scorpio, this energy has a tendency to bring out the people who want to help us to fix things in our lives. Those who have a knack for solving problems, that is, other people's problems. June is really a great time to work this energy, which is a healing for ourselves, and collecting that information and learning how to use it to make a difference in our lives and others. From June 10th through till the end of June, Jupiter will be moving into a very hard aspect, and so the potential there is that there is going to be the potential for some more chaos with a reason, which again will be, Jupiter is going to be actually forming a square to both the North Node in Libra and the South Node in Aries, and this brings a real need. And this is very important. Squares are blocks or challenges that are in our path, and Jupiter means in the constellation of Cancer is wanting us to expand and learning how to nurture care for our families, our homes, our properties, so on and so forth. But with the squares to the nodes, which is our direction, where we've come from, the South Node, squares meaning that we need to slow down a bit and really need to consult everyone involved before making a decision that affects a partnership or a group. Very, very important. This will help you if you're able to, if you understand that this influence is overall affecting everyone. And then there's this formation of this cardinal T-square, and it will stimulate this is actually a cardinal T-square that's forming between Jupiter and the nodes. You heard me talk about the North Node, the South Node, and the Libra, Aries axis in the past. And this Jupiter coming into placement to form these squares is really encouraging us to not expand, but to slow down and look, work with what we have and to honor it and respect it. The challenge in this, through this T-square, will be to act in fair ways in all relationships in your life. There's a lot of learning going on all levels, for us personally, and our actions need to be really sort of put under the microscope for a little while, and just there needs to be a bit of a concentration. And it's true, we all want to be respected and loved, but the challenge during this time could be that we need to look for nurturance in ways that are more healthy rather than not healthy. Try to show our care and concern for others in ways which are going to be bringing success to everyone, and owning our mistakes, because when we all have that human nature, we're going to make mistakes, but it's really important that we sort of during this cardinal T square showing up, it's really important that we're honest and that we make the necessary compromises so that we can work things out with each other. Ultimately, during this time, this can be a time of coming together, of letting others know that you understand. So by owning your mistakes and them owning their mistakes, it will be a great way to rebuild trust in those relationships. Now, next thing that's coming up here is Mercury appearing to go backwards from our perspective here on Earth. Mercury rules logic, reason, communication, making decisions. June 7th through July 1st. I have a chart of that I'm going to show on the screen right now. And that is the chart of Mercury retrograde. You can see Mercury over on the left-hand side of the screen. It looks the symbol is yellow, and it looks like a cross with a little head on it with antennas. That's Mercury, and it shows its retrograde here as it begins at 3 degrees of Cancer on June 7th, and by June 17th it will slip back into Gemini, where it will remain moving backward until it reaches about 24 degrees in the constellation of Gemini on July 1st. Now, this Mercury retrograde that you're seeing in this astrological chart, this Mercury retrograde period will be more powerful than most because it will be in its own sign, Gemini, on June 17th. And Mercury is the planet that rules the constellation of Gemini. And so this is going to be a very important retrograde for everyone. Take note of that. I have a diagram, the next picture. This is a great diagram of Mercury's retrograde. Before, during, and after the retrograde, this diagram. So what actually it shows is Mercury's forward movement starting around April 25th of 2014. Mercury is direct, moving in a forward motion, and it conjuncts the sun at about 5 degrees of Taurus. It's a great time of having epiphanies when Mercury lines up with the sun, and you can see that green arrow on the screen pointing right to that point, and that occurrence of that on April 25th. And by May 22nd, you can see that I've marked that spot with a little circle where you see the red line starting. May 22nd, I would encourage you to sort of retrace in your life experiences that began around May 22nd, and take note of those ideas, what you were studying, things you talked about, because that is the shadow or the foreshadowing of Mercury's retrograde. Because right around the corner, a couple days from today, on June 7th at 7:58 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the planet Mercury does begin its retrograde motion at 3 degrees Cancer. And it is a time best used for research, reflection. It's not good for making decisions during that time. And then you can see the next piece there on this diagram. Right around June 19th is the time when Mercury retrograde, Mercury actually comes back to join the sun at 28 degrees Gemini on June 19th. And this is an epiphany day as well, where we realize what this retrograde is about, what it is that we need to research more about. And that insight is helpful. And then you see moving forward, right about July 1st, at 1:33 p.m., Mercury does turn direct at 24 degrees of Gemini, and the after shadow, meaning the integration time of what we've learned, what we've researched, we begin to feel better. We begin to feel not so confused or mixed up. And that is great. And then I did include just further down the road that on August 8th of 2014, Mercury is in a forward movement, and it does join up with the sun. That day is another great epiphany day. Whenever the Mercury, which is our minds, the way we think, the way we communicate, joins up with the sun, it is a great time where we're subject to the influence of having those aha moments, those epiphany days. And just a couple notes on Mercury retrograde. It is known for causing delays, mix-ups, communication issues. If you're traveling, make sure you plan for some extra time during this period of June 7th through July 1st. I do want to say about Mercury retrograde that when it begins, in that diagram I'm pretty much all set with that. Mercury squares the midheaven as it begins on June 7th. And so what that means is to hold it back on offering advice. If there's some thoughts or ideas that you have, this is both mentally and emotionally a time to go very slowly. And I did some research about Mercury retrograde throughout history, and in cultures like India and ancient astrology studies, it was believed that when a planet turned retrograde, it was like they believe it to be like a person who was very scared, and because of their fear they became sick, and so they had to take time to recover, more mentally and emotionally than anything. So the ordinary activities of life would slow down during their retrograde period, and it is a time that the person who became sick, which is comparing this to a planet, would need to take time to recover. In medieval times, a Mercury retrograde period was considered a time to withdraw, a time to look somewhere else for answers. And as you saw by that diagram, on June 19th, Mercury, the intellectual planet, as we call it, joins the sun exactly on June 19th, and it indicates that our thoughts and spirits are joining together, and some sense and light of logic is made out of the confusing time. That's what this Mercury retrograde is about. And as July 1st, which is around the end of the retrograde, approaches, the retrograde comes to an end, meaning the planet appears to begin to move in a forward direction. People are going to be able to see things differently. But do mark the time of June 19th. Very important, because that is a time of, with the sun, with Mercury coming back to join with the sun, we kind of get this sort of enlightenment of why this time was needed. Ancient astrologers would call this a time when the person who was ill and had to retreat makes a complete recovery when the retrograde was over, and things began to look up and day-to-day life resume once again. So ancient astrologers describe Mercury retrograde as a time to surrender to desire for eternal wisdom, and to explore the inner reaches of the human spirit so that our minds could be purified by the heart of the sun or the light of spirit. So in the diagram that I showed you earlier, during Mercury's retrograde, the planet appears to turn and go back to the sun, getting a gift of light from the sun. By Mercury returning to the sun, it absorbs the light and heals itself. And when it finally feels better, it gets up and moves forward. So Mercury retrograde exposes to us You know, what I got out of all this, looking back at how ancient astrologers looked at Mercury retrograde, was that it is a time period that exposes us to where we need to complete unfinished business and develop emotional intelligence. The retrograde starts, as I said before, with Mercury at 3 degrees of Cancer, which brings up the confused emotions, and Mercury's path back into Gemini, which begins on June 17th, guides us to find our center. And then the full moon on June 12th precedes the full peak. It actually precedes the full peak of the Grand Cardinal Cross, which you've heard me talk about in past shows, as I called it the GCC energy, that we experienced back on April 21st for the 5th time. That Grand Cardinal Cross was not an easy influence of energy to manage. But here's a good thing. The full moon, along with the peaking of the Grand Cardinal Cross, will once again remind us of what we need to let go of and move away from in our life. So the full moon on June 12th, occurring with an exact peak of light of energy at 11:45 p.m. So the night of June 12th, the moon is going to be perfectly full. Reveals to us, the energy of that reveals to us the truth, and emotionally stirs up where we need to further make changes in our life. So I'm going to show you a chart of that full moon. There it is. You can see the darkened areas. The top left corner is the full moon at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. And on the bottom, you can see the sun in direct opposition with the moon. So, you know, oppositions are really important because it's the way that the universe shows us how we can come together. We do experience emotional, we have heightened emotional experiences with these two luminaries being at odds, and that is known around full moons. But this full moon does carry the light of understanding why we need to study and consciously accept new ideas. I know I'm getting close to the end of the show here today, so as I was preparing today's show, I came across a quote by Marianne Williamson that I want to share with you. She's a spiritual intuitive, and she says that nothing binds you except your thoughts. Nothing limits you except your fear, and nothing controls you except your beliefs. And this full moon around the middle of June is really going to inspire exactly this this quote, and it will remind us that we need to stimulate optimism and understanding, and that there is great knowledge available if we just seek it. So as I approach the end of the show, I want to remind you about continuing to do the things that make you happy. Do the things that inspire positivity, and always turn to the stars. You'll find your answers there. And I want to say thanks for watching Turn to the Stars. I appreciate all your continued support, and until next week, take good care. I'll see you then.